Hi there! Do you like the Earth? Do you like knowledge? Well then, you've come to the right place. Hi guys, Darren here, to introduce my buddy here, Ecology. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey Darren, I know enough about ecology. In fact, we live in an ecology. No! If you watch the video for more than 20 seconds, you impatient piece of trash, you know I'm not talking about your first search off Google. No! Today in this video, I will teach you all about the wonders of trees and other stuff in Ecology's unit. Now, to jump on in. Ecology is a branch of biology that mostly deals with the relationship of organisms with others and their physical surroundings. Ecology is based within discovery science because these fellas Darwin and Aristotle have looked at organisms in nature, and because you can get knowledge from this, it's now called natural history and is very important to ecology. There are 6 big hierarchies of biology, most of which we'll talk about. Those being organismal ecology, population ecology, community ecology, ecosystem ecology, landscape ecology, and global ecology. Ecology is closely tied to things like the previously talked about evolution and how organisms evolved to face an ecological effect. Ecology can also shed light on environmental issues like global warming and why I fail to form genuine relationships with those around me. And because of this, many people associate it together as well. Having the scientific understanding can be used to help conserve and sustain life on Earth. I mentioned earlier the scales at which ecologists work. Right now, I'll be telling you how our biology buddies determine what controls the distribution of species. There are a variety of factors that can affect where certain organisms and dudes are found. This can lead to why we find certain animals in certain places because there's a barrier preventing the dispersal. The dispersal of organisms is basically just the movement of them from one place to another, as like they disperse. There are a variety of factors that can affect how and where organisms kind of show up, and a way scientists kind of deal with that is by having a thing called like a species transplant, where they bring over an animal from one habitat to another to see how they work out and figure out why they're not really naturally occurring there. And that's why I've been trying to tell you, TSA, the 27 Black-footed ferrets in my carry-on were for science. Burned in hell, Ohio, John Glenn International Airport. And once we've gathered the species' potential range, we can also begin to figure out other reasons outside of like crossing the ocean that stops species from living in a certain habitat. There are some biotic factors that can limit species. Like imagine if you're a rabbit. You wouldn't want to go to a place with a bunch of rabbit-eating fellas there because they eat you, you know? And along with that, there can be like the unseen threats, like parasites and pathogens that can be deadly towards the species in general. Certain species can also have behavioral preferences too. It's not like life or death stuff, just like they have a preference towards a certain thing in a certain habitat. And I sure don't blame them, because I still hate Ohio, and I would never forgive the people there for their atrocities against me. And moving on from those two, there are a number of abiotic factors that can affect where species can be found. Now let's run through. I'm pretty sure it's a big one, because why would you go to a place where you freeze or burn to death? Water! Do you see any fish in the desert? No, because they can't breathe, you dumb idiot. Lindy, you ever tried drinking salt water? It's gross and you die of dehydration. Sunlight, trees need the sun. The sun. The plants must absorb the sun to live. How can they absorb the sun if there is no sun? Rocks and soil. Plants need soil or else they'll die. The climate, the 4 factors that we want, temperature, precipitation, sunlight, and wind, they work together to be a big one. Oceans, bodies of water, they influence climate in a big way. Mountains, wouldn't it be nice if you had sun, but no, a mountain is blocking your way. Seasonality, imagine needing the sun to grow crop, but then it leaves for 40 days. Climate change, sucks for the polar bears with their melting ice caps, but it's not my problem, not like I live there. And with that, we move to biomes. As we talked about earlier, climate has a great effect on this stuff and why certain biomes appear in certain places. But because biomes overlap, there are other features that come into play. Biomes are mostly named for major physical or climatic features, and sometimes the dominant vegetation found there. Although most biomes seem to be walled off and isolated from each other, they pretty much tend to overlap each other actually. And because of that, scientists found more reasons other than climate such as forest biomes having more prominent vertical layering of vegetation to tell the differences between certain biomes. Aquatic biomes are most often characterized by their physical appearance and how scientists differentiate them on a physical and chemical differences, like how freshwater biomes have much lower salt concentration, as the name implies. And the most notable one, the ocean, is pretty much the Earth's largest biome, and because of how big it has a huge impact on the whole biosphere, like globally. And along with that, freshwater biomes are also pretty darn important because they supply a lot of the water that terrestrial biomes need to survive. And with that, we move on to the next lesson. Ecology. But you already knew that, but we're focusing on population ecology. Now, what is a population? A population is a group of goons living in the same general area. They rely on the same resources and are affected by the same environmental factors and interact with breeding one another. There's usually three main ways in which these species are split up. Most popular being clump, where many animals group together where resources are pretty solid. Uniform, where animals are, you guessed it, uniformly spaced between each other due to societal boundaries.
I still see your shadows in my room. Can't take back the love that I gave you. It's to the point where I love and I hate you, and I cannot change you, so I must replace you. Oh, easier said than done.
And random, which is, random. That, we need to talk about demographics as well. Demography is basically the study of statistics of populations and how they change over time. These so-called demographers, as I've coined, use pieces like life tables, survivorship curves, and reproductive rates to summarize demographics trends. Natural selection is often buddy-buddy with things that improve survival and reproduction, and the traits that do make up its life history. Life history is mainly three things: when reproduction begins, how often it reproduces, and how many offspring are made each time. And with that, there are also big ways of reproduction. There's seminiparis, where an organism has one and done birth that kind of just dies, and aeroparis, where an organism can give birth repeatedly. Factors like the chances of survival for the offspring tend to be the reasons for the choice between the two. Now, with some of this knowledge, I know what you're thinking. We live in a world focused around money, which makes it extremely difficult to pursue what you're passionate about without facing various financial roadblocks. Yes, this is true, but something a little bit more relevant to this video that you're thinking is, can't you just put all the best traits together and not have those with the lame downsides? Well, it's because there are trade-offs between the certain traits being conflicting demands for certain resources. Demographers also look into the expansion of a species, because overpopulation exists and stuff like that. A simple thing these scientists do is calculate the numbers and stuff because they're nerds. There's two that basically simulate it in a sort of perfect idealized environment. Those being the per capita rate of increase, which is just a simple calculation that ignores stuff like immigration. So it's basically just birth rate minus death rate. And the other one is exponential growth, which represents a population's potential growth in an unlimited environment and shows you, you guessed it, exponential rate of increase of individuals in an environment. There's also a third, slightly more realistic one, should I put it, way of calculating the growth with the logistic model. The logistic model weighs in stuff like carrying capacity to find the growth of a population. It kind of grows till it levels out as it reaches the carrying capacity. It may seem better and more realistic, but this model still doesn't fit any population well enough, but it's good for an estimate. There are actually two life history patterns I will delve into soon. There are density-dependent and density-independent selection, which are pretty much self-explanatory once you finish grade 8 science, science fair. A thing you can notice today about our growing population is that the growth has dropped a decent amount in the last couple of decades or so since the baby boomers era. This is due to humans slowly climbing towards the global carrying capacity as mentioned earlier. Soon we might hit the limit and go all apocalyptic on each other, like the movies Mad Max, 2012, and Shrek the Musical. Moving on, we now have our community ecology. This is all about interactions and stuff between species in a community. Yeah! Started off, most interactions are classified by how they affect the parties involved in it. There's competition, where species compete for a resource. Predation, where a big fella hunts tiny dudes and eats them. And herbivory, where a guy eats part of a plant. Along with that, there's also a series of symbiosis, which is when two species live in close proximity of each other, and there are three types, being mutualism, where both parties benefit, commensalism, where one benefits and the other is neutral, This one's kind of rare because there's always a little leaning towards a certain side. And parasitism, where one absolute vermin leeches off the other while they suffer, like how you stole my biology video idea while I told you about Anthony. It doesn't matter that I ran over your dad in my mom's Honda Civic, and no, I will not be settling in court. There can be many species in a community, and a way that we're able to tell is to measure with species richness and the relative abundance to find out how many species there are and how often they occur. And since we're on the topic of communities, what's the deal with the airline food? I mean food chains and food webs. Yeah, these food chains and webs play a role in showing community dynamics between species. These webs are often limited because as you go along the web, or as I say, higher in the trophic levels or whatever, the energy transfer gets more inefficient because of energy loss and all that. Now to community roles. In your average community, you can find some key fellows in there. One of them being a dominant species, which is the most abundant and competitive species in town. There's also keystone species, which hold a pretty big disproportionate influence on community structure because it holds an important niche or specialty if you're unaware of the term. Also there are foundation species, or as the book puts it, ecosystem engineers. Like keystone species, they hold a really specific niche that benefits the community. But unlike them, it's more of a physical change in an environment rather than decomposition or something like that the keystone would do. An obvious example would be something like the beaver. When scientists look at the dynamics of communities, there's usually two ways they look at it: top-down and bottom-up controls. Top-down usually says that the predators control the herbivores, which in turn control the producers. The bottom-up is basically the same, but in reverse. To try to simplify it, it's basically which way you decide to tip your dominoes. In the past, scientists thought that most communities were at a constant state of equilibrium, but now it's widely accepted that events such as fires and human activity, coined disturbances, allow communities to constantly change in a relatively new, non-equilibrium model. So moderate levels of disturbance is considered good rather than either extreme. After a pretty nasty disturbance, the community area usually gets recolonized by a number of species. Folks usually call this ecological succession. It usually starts with the basic kind of life forms like autotrophic prokaryotes and lichen carrying by spores and such, and this allows the soil to gradually develop. This is called primary succession. There's also secondary succession. It occurs in places post-disturbance that have soil intact. There are three types of species that can arrive in the community. There's ones that facilitate, make conditions more favorable, those that inhibit establishment, and those that just tolerate and chill there while doing their own thing. Lately, well not lately, but lately compared to the rest of the earth, humans have created widespread disturbance around the globe, be it malicious or not. Logging, excessive grazing, and more have really been nasty to a lot of the communities. And these aren't like the classic disturbance I mentioned earlier, which is good. This is pretty nasty because it's continued and such. A lot of communities have been suffering from this, be it like tropical rainforests or marine spaces and such all over the world. You see species diversity, and that's pretty bad. Like the Great Barrier Reef is dying, that sucks because SpongeBob lives there. And he has a cool new game coming out soon, so it'd be a bummer if he just died. I mentioned earlier about biodiversity and how it's important and all of that, but there are also other things that can affect it. Two big ones: the latitude and area it occupies can have a huge effect on biodiversity. The growing seasons of like places that are close to the equator are actually up to 5 times as fast as those on the ends of the earth. That's why you find way more species and stuff. And also, the more area you have, the more biodiversity you tend to have. It's kind of simple as that. And moving on, for people that are into it, scientists say that islands are pretty good for studying a lot of these things. And by islands, I don't just mean the sandy shore beach kind of island. They basically just mean any kind of isolated area out there. And these places are ripe with information for these science fellas. An example used is basically to compare immigration, death rates, birth rates, along with the size of islands to get varying amounts of data, which is pretty helpful. But something that is not helpful are pathogens. Those things are whack. A prime example being the pathogens that are destroying things like the coral reef, causing a sort of cascading effect which kills off a lot of the biodiversity in communities. Another thing whack about these pathogens is the existence of zoonotic diseases. Basically, diseases transfer from one species to others, mostly humans. And don't sleep on that either. Like, have you ever heard of something called like the bubonic plague? That thing was zoonotic. You ever see the game Last of Us? That cordyceps thing is freaky as hell, and I don't want anything to do with that either. The upside is that zoologists are pretty good at what they do, and they can lock down diseases before they kind of start and get going, which is good for us. But moving on, let's get to our next topic.
Oh, that's a
ecosystem. Now fellas, before I get into this, I just gotta let you know what an ecosystem is. An ecosystem is basically a community of species and their interactions with their physical environment. We got that down? Good. Now let's get on over to the info. Ecosystems tend to be pretty independent with the recycling of everything and all. But with that, we gotta remember Newton's laws of thermodynamics. Basically, all energy can be neither created or destroyed, but rather moved around a lot. But some of it is always lost as heat. But don't worry about that, because we always got the sun to give us more of that stuff. Otherwise, we'd be screwed. Mass in the ecosystems is in a similar spot where it's recycled around, but it also tends to swap between ecosystems, traveling around the world on an adventure. Ecosystems tend to have a set budget for the amount of energy as determined by the primary producer, which in turn gets inefficiently handed down to consumers like some old hand-me-downs. But in general, you can find the net primary production by getting the gross and subtracting the energy used by primary producers for respiration. Marine and terrestrial biomes also have unique problems in terms of production. Both are limited in their own ways. Marine ecosystems in the photic zone tend to be limited by nutrients like iron and nitrogen. Terrestrial ecosystems mostly have problems with their soil in terms of production. When we talked about food webs a while ago, I mentioned how it can only go so far because of the inefficiency of the energy. Well, that rears its head out here. If a consumer were to eat something below it on the pyramid, it would only gain about 10% of its energy, as a lot of the energy in the prey went to stuff like heat and poop. This is why it's often represented by a pyramid, because as you go further up the pyramid, you're forced to eat a lot more stuff to gain the same amount of energy. Ecosystems, although getting energy blasts from the sun, they can't really get nutrients and chemicals the same way. So important chemicals usually get passed around in a circle just like in kindergarten, but not really. These chemicals tend to cycle around and travel across ecosystems in a near global scale. Most of the cycles usually involve things like decomposers and is generally kept in check by vegetation and such. You've also probably heard about all the bad stuff that humans have doing, messing with the environment, and I've gotta say, that's a major bummer. There are a number of ways this is happening, and I'll list off the big ones for you. There's all the nutrient enrichment with fertilizers, and those can pollute the groundwater and make it really bad for some ecosystems. There's acid rain, which is not as bad as it sounds, but it's still pretty bad, as all the gunky stuff gets put in the rain. Toxins, which can gather up in animals and the food we eat. Greenhouse gases, where the earth is a preheating oven full of CO2. The depletion of ozone, which will eventually let the sun beam us with deadly lasers. But it's not like it's my problem. I'm not gonna even live to face it, so it's the next generations. I always keep my AC on and my heater on. You gotta get the balance. I never recycle, so why should I care for the... Hi, welcome to DSauce's awesomely bodacious science show. Believe it or not, it's the DSauce show. I'm Dr. Darren, I'm doing science. And doing the science, I'm Dr. Darren. I have a PhD. Believe it or not, it's me. Hi, I'm Dr. Darren Lee, PhD, and welcome back to DSauce's awesomely bodacious science show. Today, we're going to be environmentalists and learn how to save the planet. And to teach you, I must give you knowledge. So, children, join me on this glorious adventure as we learn about the wonderful world of trees and other factors that threaten biodiversity. Okay, I'll take that as a yes. As we all know, trees have existed long before the human race came into being. In fact, the first ever trees were planted by the ancient dinosaurs to flex on others who only had lame bushes. But now, trees and everything are endangered, and we must save the trees! Humans are currently threatening trees and other species all around the globe at 3 levels of biodiversity: genetic, species, and ecosystem. And we must value these. We must make an active effort to save these species, or else they'll go away like those gone extinct long ago. There are 3 big reasons why these specimens are dying: habitat loss, introduced species, and overexploitation. It's terrible! These trees are facing so much hardship. Only you can stop forest fires. We must save the trees. Now to begin the road to saving biodiversity, we must focus on a few things. There are a few ways we can combat this, being the small population approach, the declining population, and weighing conflict demands. Another way we can help do this is by keeping habitats genetically diverse to promote dispersal. But I have a better idea. I have decided to open a protected area. For the past 15 years, me and my PhD have been conducting genetic research to build a park blooming with trees. And now I'm proud to say that the Tree Laboratories has finally created the Amazon Rainforest Park, an amusement park where people can come to see all the trees and have an experience of a lifetime. Now we only have one forest so far, but we're planning to extend. Wait! No! 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 Years of research down the drain! No! Why couldn't you save it? Only you can stop forest fires! Why? And now, my best friend Louis Armstrong, here to pay respects. Kick it, Louis. Trees of green, trees of green, trees of green, more trees of green, and I think to myself, those are green as trees. Thank you, Louis. Very amazing. Kids, remember to ask your parents to buy Louis' new album, What a Wonderful, now on iTunes and Spotify. With my pride and joy gone, we still must ensure the survival of biodiversity. Now I've devised ways that we can do this. We can harness organisms as slaves to detoxify habitats with biomediation. We can use organisms for free labor to supply the habitat with what I call biological augmentation. And there are boundless more possibilities to explore. We must save the trees and the environment. And with that, you know all that is needed to save the environment. And I must congratulate you because my show is so packed with knowledge that you have learned 7 years of information in this 22-minute video. You have gained this privilege. And that is why I'm honored today to bestow upon you your very own PhD. Congratulations! I personally award you with a PhD in ecology. Please put it to good use and use it to save the environment. And I will see you in the next episode of D-Sauce's awesomely bodacious science show. Thanks for tuning in for the first and last episode of D-Sauce's awesomely bodacious science show. This is our final episode because we are getting canceled because I haven't paid my taxes in 7 years. That's me, Darren, and I thank you for watching our show. Aha! I got you with the abbreviation. So that's why I've been replacing the paper straws in Starbucks with plastic ones. They'll never catch me. It's not my earth when I die. Thank you, everyone, and roll credits.